Technology isn't just a part of our everyday lives anymore. It's become a frontier for global powers, with India right in the mix. So why not join the conversation? Take the Technopolitik Survey, created by researchers at the Takshashila Institution. It's just 10 simple questions, but your answers could help shape India's strategy in navigating the fast-changing world of high-tech geopolitics. Your voice matters, so let's make it heard. The link is in the bio.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to this episode of All Things Policy at the Takshashila Institution. Today I have with me Swathi and Dr. Nithiyanandam, Geospatial experts at the Takshashila Institution. My name is Yusuf Unjhawala. Today we are going to talk about the Teesta River water, and the context of this one is we have a new dispensation in Bangladesh after Sheikh Hasina's government was kind of removed from power and she fled to India. While we had a very friendly government in Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh, the river water problem for the Teesta was not solved. There was an agreement that was kind of arrived to, but due to opposition within India as well, especially from West Bengal, that the agreement could not go through. With the new government or the new arrangement in Bangladesh, they have again talked about the Teesta River water. And so we thought we'll just have a chat about this. So my colleagues Swathi and Nitya are here and we'll talk about it. Swathi and Nitya, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Yusuf.
Yeah, Swathi, let's start with just an overview of what this Teesta River water issue is, if at all. What is the issue? What is the ask of Bangladesh? And what is India's answer to this? And why things are where they are, where it is a stalemate?
So to start with, India and Bangladesh share about 54 rivers. There are 54 transboundary rivers between both of them. And the hydropolitics began specifically with the Farakka barrage, which came up in 1976, which is related to the Ganga water. But India and Bangladesh could come to an agreement in 1996 regarding the Ganga Water Treaty. And India has actually complied to the rules which was placed in the treaty. But that is also going to terminate in 2026. But when it came to Teesta River, there could not be an agreement, especially because of multiple regional political factors. Also, the fact that when it comes to Teesta River, only 1/3 of it flows in Bangladesh, while 2/3 of it is in the northern West Bengal and the Sikkim region. And India is the proper upper riparian state for that, as it originates from India itself in the Sikkim. So when the talks for the Teesta River water came up, especially after the canals were built by both Bangladesh and West Bengal, as water is a state subject. So it came up, and during the lean season, there was no enough water flowing into Bangladesh, and they criticized Indian projects in the Teesta River for that. But both of them being agriculture dependent, surface water dependent, they couldn't come to a table of agreement, basically. And in the 2011, finally, when Teesta River Treaty was written, saying that 47.5% would go to India and 36% would go to Bangladesh, West Bengal came up and opposed the treaty, saying that it will massively affect the population of West Bengal, the northern districts which are dependent on them. And the Indian government had to back off from that, and that's where it's standing right now.
Isn't it fair that the West Bengal demands a bit more of the water? Because if, like you said, the 2/3 of the river is located in India, it flows in India, it means that a lot more people in India are going to be dependent on the Teesta water. And India being a water-stressed country will have its own needs. So the 37.5% that was offered was pretty substantial from India's point of view. But with the state government not being on board and the state having its own need, I think we would say it's fair. So what can be done? What kind of data would be necessary to take this forward? And I'll come to Nitya for this one. Nitya, since you specialize in the geospatial aspects of it, I'm sure there is a lot more data that can be gathered using various modern tools that are available, which can help India come up with more scientific methods, and where a lot more of the share of the water can be scientifically presented to the Bangladeshis, and saying that this is why we need more water and this is fair.
Yeah. So any decision which is driven by facts and scientific data sets would be the most suitable one. People can consider it on either side, right? So what is actually required is we are collecting data at different levels. Some part of data that could be meteorological data sets, and that could be the IoT based data sets, which talks about different parameters of rivers and so on. But there are a lot of aspects that still left out as a gap. If we really want to present our case, we should get data sets at different altitudes, at different levels of upstream, and from different sources. That includes remote sensing data sets. That the other set of data comes from the models, because in case of situation like river basin management and modeling, there's a set of assumptions to be taken, and one can simulate it. By simulating it, we'll come to know what kind of river flow we will get it, and what kind of the impacts it can cause to its other features on land and so on is to be predicted. For that, one needs to have something called a nexus approach to it, data from various sources and the impact of one parameter on other aspect. Let's say the impact of water on agriculture, the impact of water on, let's say, disaster. So that kind of nexus approach is required, and more of scientific based evidences, perhaps from datasets from satellites, datasets on ground, and a bit of simulation would get a comprehensive idea of what is a scenario on the ground. So once we have that, it is then it is would be better to equate and see what are the genuine ask in either cases, and how where the what is the real time situation on the ground, because sometimes the demands goes beyond the capacity of what is actually on the ground. So in order to make that decision, we need scientific based evidence.
And this would include, say, even impact of climate change. I mean, Teesta River is originating in Sikkim, which is fed by the glaciers. Right. So if the glaciers are retreating, that data has to be, be considered and kind of modeled, as you said, right? Scientific modeling is required. So the extent of the depletion of the glacier has also to be studied and then factored in before coming up at because 10 years or 15 years or maybe 20 years down the line, as the water levels in India reduce, there will be again a lot of demands from India to renegotiate the treaty. And you know how once treaties are signed, they're very difficult to renegotiate. We've seen with the Indus Water Treaty. And, but because the demands are there, there will be calls to reconsider things. So how do we consider that as well?
See, there's certain commonality between the downstream countries, and always there are certain challenges posted to upstream countries. When it comes to downstream countries, the water requirements are increasing and increasing, because in the downstream you generally carries the floodplains, right, where agricultural activities are increasing, and then people goes towards closer to the river and build their settlements, and urbanization happens at higher rate and higher rates. Now, while the simulation and modelings can take care of certain aspects, there are certain global challenges, not just local challenges. The global challenges includes climate change, which is posted. And in this area, in addition to the local natural hazards, climate change again plays a crucial role, because we all know the glaciers are not in the same way that used to be in several years ago, right? So it do have rapid melting, and then in some places that it's actually depleting at a much faster rate. So this understanding on this, the scientific understanding on this data set will actually help. You brought out a right point to see what could be the potential demand. So there is a need to discriminate between the source of water which comes from raining and the source of water which comes from the glacier depletion. So when we could able to distinguish these kind of thing in these cases, then we could able to see the actual water which is available in future. But then it also depends on how much water is being utilized on its way. At times, it is over pumped. It is over pumping is a problem in many of the downstream areas. And again, in the case where more and more population are coming up, the demand will obviously go high. So while catering for local factors, you rightly brought out the global factors need to be considered. There are scientific ways of taking care of the global factors also. So we can include those in consideration given the overall accepted scientific way of predicting climate change and so on. We can see the thread through that. But then again, I'm repeating, we need to look at it as a comprehensive problem. It's not just water as a unique thing to be looked at. Water, climate, and urbanization, and many other factors to be considered as a nexus of problem, and any solution that includes should also comes as a nexus of all these factors.
So one of the factors would be flooding and droughts,
Yeah.
and that's seasonal. Swati, Teesta sees some floods during the heavy rain season, and then probably a bit of lean patch during the the lean season, and that then becomes a bone of contention as to how much water is released. India has one project, I think, in Sikkim, hydroelectric project, but do we have any other projects coming up? How can India control the flood? And then also that would help Bangladesh, where India has the capabilities to create, flood mitigation mechanisms by ways of dams and reservoirs and things like that. How will that play out? And will Bangladesh agree to that? What was the agreement in 2011? And can the shares then, be renegotiated, where things like, projects which help flood mitigation and drought mitigation help?
So yes, there will be a comprehensive planning surely required for that. Coming to the projects going on in Sikkim, there it is, since the river emerges from there are multiple hydropower projects which are being implemented. The Teesta 3 dam did have breakage and destruction and flood in 2-3 years ago. But coming to the downward section in Gajaldoba in West Bengal, there is a canal which goes out from the Teesta River. So when there is enough water in the monsoon season, it's really not much of an issue. But when it comes to the lean season, if the much water is taken up from the canal, the downstream water which goes into Bangladesh again decreases further, and then it again affects the paddy crop, especially because these West Bengal as a state and even Bangladesh as a country, there's someone who grows paddy all 3 seasons. So I think there is also an additional agricultural knowledge which will be required to manage water. At the end of the day, it's water is not a free source. They'll have to realize that, and you will have to have an agricultural point of view also to be brought into this section. And coming to the flood management section, there will be again need for a basin-based development rather than looking at borders or states, where West Bengal stakeholders will have to come to the table, and maybe a lot of more expertise could come into it, especially regarding the carrying capacity, as Nithya stated, because the river has a particular carrying capacity which can only be formulated when there is enough data on it, how much water it has. So especially also if you have the carrying capacity data, maybe you could formulate the percentage share much better, because you could say that this much water is going into Bangladesh and this is the population. You could create a more pragmatic ratio than what is currently there and not agreed by the state. So yes.
But given how the relations have changed between India and Bangladesh, I'm sure there'll be certain impact of that, and a little of less incentive for India to even discuss at the moment, or it can be used as a leverage by India when it now, if it wants to talk about the Teesta River with Bangladesh. Have you seen any indications coming out from Bangladesh as to what their do they have any new sets of demands? What are they asking now?
So the interim government advisor has told that we will initiate the talks, and with their interviews, it is more clear that they want to take the international laws which are in place regarding transboundary rivers, which is done in other countries. So, again, bringing the stakeholders, because international laws might not consider the regional factors, which is much more crucial when it comes to the Teesta River. And also the fact that it's not just West Bengal. You have to bring the Sikkim also here as climate becomes important, as reservoirs become important, because the more they are storing the water, the lesser there is for the lean flow which will come into it. So it becomes a 4-player Indian government, Sikkim government, and the West Bengal government, which Bangladesh will have to listen to, taking the fact that for 90% of their water sources, they're dependent on the transboundary rivers. So also, since India is the upper riparian state, India has a higher population, India has the water scarcity issues, there will be an agreement that Bangladesh will have to come to. Also, since 2026 is the end of the Ganga Water Treaty, maybe it's time to start thinking of a possible solution right now, so that by 2 years you could have a plausible, implementable share treaty agreement, and also include the much further factors, not just water quantity, right? No, don't look at it from just a arithmetic hydrology perspective. Bring in the quality or the climate factor, the agrarian factors. You can integrate a lot of things. So 2 years is quite good enough time which you can take it up and think of the possible solutions which could be agreed upon in 2026. And you also have a joint water committee already in place because of the Ganga Water Treaty. Bring more people into it, bring the expert people into it, use the geospatial technologies that are in place. That is where I guess more weather stations or more data could come into play, including the bureaucrats and the politicians. There will be need for higher expertise in the team to create a more plausible water share formula, possibly.
When it comes to river water sharing with its neighbors, India has been pretty honest, right? We have done our bit with Pakistan, despite our historic acrimonious relations, or even more, there are enemies. We have fought so many wars. Despite that, we have the Indus Water Treaty, and it has survived all the wars India has fought. And like you mentioned, we have the Ganga Water Treaty with Bangladesh. So India does that, right? India does what good neighborly relations, and it wants to solve problems. In fact, India also delineated the maritime boundary with Bangladesh. It abided by the UNCLOS arbitration verdict. So we do that. Why has Teesta been, which seems unsolvable, so to seem, for so many years? And what plausible solutions do you have?
So the one thing that I can think of is maybe looking at the local factors. The economic dependence is for sure one of the reasons, the agricultural dependence. So I think that is one where we should start working at, both in the West Bengal region and the Bangladesh region, possibly looking at it from the perspective of not just how much water is there, how can we use it efficiently, how you can solve the food, you can relate it to food security as well as livelihoods, as well as the disaster preparedness. So that's one thing. And so this particular multi-perspective will have to be brought into the table. And the next fact is, as data has to be there, there has to be more a collection of the hydrological data, which is very essential for flood inundation. Until you know what could be the possible flow, you will not be prepared enough for it. So if you have the data enough in the initial months, possibly regarding a river flow, there are applications and technology available to predict how much water it could be there. And then you can formulate the other relative policies in the local level itself. And with there is GIS data available through SMS right now. So it is not even difficult to reach the ground level people. I think it's more about people coming together and deciding that they want a solution and talk about it. And I think India is a country that it will listen. It will not take decisions in a rapid manner. So I think if Bangladesh does the initiation and asks what it needs actually, and probably agrees to a more pragmatic share of the Teesta River, maybe it could happen.
Yeah, just to add to it, you've explained two great points. I just wanted to clarify those. The first one is like the people who want to utilize the water, they consider it, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, they consider it as a free resource, right? The development happens in a complete different tangent, and people are not controlling the development utilization. In fact, one good example is 3 times cultivation of paddy for say. While this is happening, while a lot of water has been consumed, and this is never going down, and it's always increasing, and there is no efficient mechanism is looked at to minimize the water consumption. As long as it is available, people are going for it, right? While this is happening, the demand will always go, even despite you think of any policies or any water sharing mechanism that will again put us in trouble. One. The second aspect that you talked about, the data and willingness of a country like India to share data with a downstream nation, I think it is much possible, and we are open compared to many other upstream countries who try to sell data, and also who does not share data on a regular basis, which puts us in trouble in many cases. But in this case, I think we are open, and we would be sharing more scientific based data sets. But then we do have certain limitations. We may not be collecting it at full front, but then we both have to sit together to remove that chaos and then say, like, this is what data we are collecting, and we are happy to share with you. If there is necessity to collect at more closer locations, more at downstream on the transboundary cases, we'd be happy to do it. And then whatever the mechanism to be there in order to ensure transparency in the process to be done, so that people can go and make decisions without any biases. Otherwise, it's always gives a feel like upstream countries are doing something and always trying to restrict what are the downstream countries. It's not the case. The upstream countries do have certain cases, unless the upstream countries want to be more authoritative of the water which is available to them by storing it more often and then utilizing it to the maximum level without considering the downstream. But in this case, I think it is not the fact, and I think it can be worked out if both of them comes together, sit on table, ensure a transparent mechanism to bring it out, and that can be doable.
Well, before we end, a couple of questions, Swathi. Do we have any such arrangements at the international with some other countries where transboundary rivers were solved, where the upper riparian strait has more of the water, right? Like in this case of Teesta, right? It's a 400 odd kilometer river where 300 odd kilometers is in India. So we have far more, of the river running through India rather than the lower riparian state. Do we have any examples where such case are there international which has been solved amicably?
So a good example of a transboundary arrangement is between USA and Canada. They share a lot of lakes and as well as rivers which flow through, most of them coming from Canada, and they have a joint committee where there are members from Canada as well as USA, and they have expert committees, political committees, and they have categorized it accordingly, and they have solved more than 100 disputes which come up regarding, it might be like 10 disputes regarding one river, but they have been able to handle as the data says, more than 90% of the disputes amicably without even taking it to probably a political stand. The cases go to the committee first, they regulate it, and they try to come up with solutions and recommend. And it has been quite successful in USA, Canada, and there are again a few more joint committees in many of the European countries, especially the Volga, whichever the long rivers are there, Germany, Switzerland. But then they are quite smaller states, which is not that comparable to India and Bangladesh. But I think the USA, Canada one is comparable, and their committee has worked quite well.
I think it's not a good comparison because Canada is such a small population where, they have so many lakes and rivers also. I mean, that would be... So, to end with, looking at the larger international transboundary governance system, do you have any idea of which are the other countries which have similar problems and where, Teesta River that India and Bangladesh can negotiate and talk about can serve as like a template to, approach transboundary rivers? Yeah,
probably I can take this question. Despite the challenges and the criticism happens with Indus Basin per se. But then in my understanding, it turned out to be the good, transboundary case where things are managed for a very long time in a successful way, right? But then things are happening due to many reasons in downstream, and downstream countries always, has suspecting the upstream countries and then puts out their requirements in that case. Other than this subcontinent region, you also have Zambezi River. That has a major transboundary challenge that flows between two countries, right? But then these are the things a certain third-party organization comes in and then try to solve it. The one of that was the forum in which I used to be, that is like the Indus Basin Knowledge Forum, or organization like IASA, International Institute of Applied Sciences, where they try to solve those transboundary problems by bringing out more scientific data into picture. Like we did a simulation exercise with a group of people from Pakistan and Afghanistan to see what are the factors on ground which gets impacted by this water, how utilization happens, what are the contributing factors, and how each of us utilize the the water in a different ways, and what could be the future. Like, we also looked at the future in case if a climate change impacts to a certain level, what could be the potential impact on upstream and downstream, right? Can we able to share water with the way we are? We may not. If you get excess water, you will release it to the downstream in general. But if you get short of water, then you will try to save it for yourself, right? That's a natural process. And also, we looked at the political scenarios for say. If a political scenario changes, that's exactly what happened in Bangladesh now. Suddenly, there's a lot of focus on Teesta River, using as a tool to, look into India's, India's transboundary challenges. Now, this is the exact case we envisaged a couple of years ago. That's like, if a political scenario changes, what will be the impact on different areas of this upstream and downstreams? And then the last one is going as business as usual. If nothing happens, like, what will be the requirement in future given the current trend of urbanization, current trend of agriculture, and so on. So these kind of challenges exist in some of the larger river basins, and we need to look at, as I said, with more and more transparency and more data sets. And also, we need to think of resource as something we need to share, and upper riparian state may not always show the authoritarian over the data. So that is something where, the research has to be shared peacefully with people. And then, and lower riparian state should also realize the challenges that upper riparian state happens at times. So we need to look at what is actually available with India. Then only we can able to share with the downstream also, right? And then certain problems which are transboundary, let's say environmental problems, those can be addressed by working together. So that is something where we need to develop larger cooperation and then data transparency to solve it.
All right. On that note, we come to an end of this episode. Thanks, Dr. Nitya, and thanks, Swathi, for your views on the Teesta River. I hope our listeners get some insight into this issue. Until the next time, thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.